Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Glenda Algaze. I'm your moderator for today.
Excellent.
Okay, we're just waiting for students to come. I
Okay,
can't wait to hear your topic.
no problem. What we should do is I'll go through the talk, and then if you could just monitor the questions,
I
and
will.
then at the end just read them to me, and then I'll field them.
Perfect. No problem. Okay.
Excellent.
Yes.
The Zoom thing is amazing. You get to do so many different conferences without getting on a plane or traveling anywhere.
I know. I wonder if it's going to continue. I did a lot of traveling myself. I'm wondering if it's going to continue.
Yeah. This is the second one that I do today. I had an 8 o'clock this morning on very, very similar topic. So all good.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, I'm just gonna turn my camera off and I'll have the microphone on though.
Great. Just let me know when to go. Do I introduce myself or how does that go?
Yes, because they didn't send me a bio or anything for me to introduce you. So if you would, that'd be great.
Not a problem. Just let me know when you want me to start.
Okay, I don't see any attendees.
It wasn't too obvious from the way that I went in, so we'll see.
And we have a lot of students registered. I'm hoping. I'm gonna call my friend here and see if she's in a different conference or see if she's got attendees because I don't know where ours are. People, let's see. Oh yes, we have our people here. Yes, we do. They're here.
Okay.
Oh,
Great.
Yes, they're here. Me, just one of the teachers. Mr. Ariosa, can you hear us? I'm hoping they can hear. Everybody's green, so I'm thinking, let me see if I can. Oh, he's muted. I don't want to mute. Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
No, that's the reason call because I
Oh,
don't hear anything.
no, they can't hear us.
No, that's the reason because I don't hear anything. He already started talking,
I hear him. I mean, he's talking to me,
but I don't hear anything.
but you don't hear him.
No?
I'm talking. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you,
Okay.
but the participants can't hear you. Huh. Huh. Let me go and
I just got a couple of notes that they can't hear me.
They can?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Then you can start.
Okay. Tanisha, could you verify that you can hear me?
Yeah, I'm on the chat, so I hear. Okay.
Okay, yeah, you're good. All right. Good morning. My name is Pete Martinez, and I have a very, very special congratulations for all of you. You choosing STEM careers will be life-changing. This is the greatest opportunity in many, many different ages that you will have an opportunity to change the world. Technology right now is the biggest driver of evolution, and everything that we know the world to be will be changed and improved because of the technology. So you're in the right field at the right time. Let me give you a little bit of perspective and background on myself, because I was right where you were a few years back. I came over from Cuba in 1961. I grew up in Miami. I went to school in Miami. I graduated from high school in Miami, went to Miami-Dade College for 2 years, and then graduated from the University of Miami in electrical engineering. I was very fortunate to start my career with IBM in 1975. So in 1975, what was very interesting about that point in time, I was able to be part of the original IBM personal computer, which changed the world. It became the standard for computing, and it led to marvelous innovations along the way. I was also part of IBM's original internet division when we created the whole e-commerce and e-business cycles. I was able to work on unbelievable architectures. I worked on supercomputers. I worked on Watson supercomputer. I worked on Blue Gene. I was able to be one of the founders of IBM's business consulting organization that now has 66,000 employees in it. I retired from IBM 14 years ago now at age 53. One, because I could. Second, because I wanted to do a lot of innovation based off of the technologies that I had learned, based off of the processes, based off of a lot of the great innovations and fantastic people that I had the opportunity to work with. So I started up a number of companies. I have 4 right now in the space of artificial intelligence and health. Why? Because it is going to be one of the most transformative places for health. So give me an example. But what's fascinating about this whole story is that I have done my whole 46-year career without leaving South Florida. I was IBM Vice President of Global Business Services when I retired, and I was a general manager here in Florida. So I was a senior executive at a Fortune 10 company. And now I have had the opportunity to create a number of companies as startups in South Florida. So the notion that you have to leave Florida, you have to leave South Florida to go into the corporate world or the startup world, complete fallacy. You can have a very successful and very creative career in the technology fields, in the STEM fields, right here in South Florida. And with all of the growth that we have right now, it'll get even better. So let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence actually goes back about 30, 40 years. A lot of the original work on artificial intelligence goes back to the 1980s, 1970s. So what's the difference between just regular intelligence or computer intelligence and artificial intelligence? Normal computers, for the most part, they add, subtract, multiply, divide, and they move information around. That's called linear computing. Artificial intelligence is quite different. Artificial intelligence actually is looking for patterns. It's reasoning, so it's looking for context of why did something happen? Not that it happened, but why did it happen? And it's also looking at predictive modeling. What is likely to happen next? Because it's learning. So you hear the term machine learning. That means that the computer is actually, with every cycle that it has, with every transaction that it does, it's actually learning from its past and it's perfecting itself for the future. So those are the 3 fundamental things related to artificial intelligence: pattern recognition, the ability to reason, and the ability to learn. So if you look at what's happening now, say, let's go through a couple of examples of how artificial intelligence is being used today in the health space. And I'm not going to give you theoretical. This is the work that we're actually doing right now in our companies. So take a look at example number 1. Rare diseases in kids, genetic diseases in kids, are quite difficult to analyze and diagnose. Okay, Yet, 1 out of 10 kids in this country is born predisposed to a rare genetic disease. And these can be very, very difficult diseases, everything from seizures to small heads to a lot of the diseases that we commonly identify with. It normally takes a highly skilled geneticist about 3 to 4 days to diagnose one case. One child with a rare genetic disease, 3 to 4 days. Why? Because they take the DNA sequence that comes from a sequencing machine. It gives the profile of the individual. It highlights all of the areas of the chromosome and the genome and the problems that they might have associated with it. And then they have to map over to a number of different databases of the 7,000 potential diseases that a kid could have. So it requires an awful lot of cutting and pasting and talking to other physicians, other geneticists, and digging through libraries of data. What we did was take the mind of highly, highly skilled geneticists and codified it. What that means is we took their filtering process, their decision-making process, and put it into software, put it into algorithms. So the thought process that a human being goes through, we replicated into a machine. We were able to do that case, that 3 to 4 days per case, and we reduced it down to 10 seconds. 10 seconds for one incredibly difficult case to analyze. So in doing that, we've also improved the accuracy because you don't have the human error. Well, I didn't understand, I didn't misread, I had to go home for the night and then pick up on the case again. So we've done this thing 150,000 times. That means we have helped 150,000 kids and their families through some very, very difficult times. Okay? So there are a couple of things here that are very important. First, the usage of artificial intelligence to attack very complex issues. Genetics is one very key issue. The second one is the ability to now model and create very large databases so that you can see what is going on in the larger realm. Having 150,000 cases from around the world is very unique because for the most part, a hospital, a laboratory will work on 4 or 5 cases in a month, and they're as good as those 4 or 5 cases are in terms of their understanding. However, if you have 1,000 cases, if you have 5,000 cases, your total knowledge grows exponentially. If you have 150,000 cases from around the world, then you have one very powerful big data base that you can start running all kind of analytics on it. And you start learning an awful lot of the pattern recognition associated with diseases. What are the most prevalent diseases? Why do they occur? Is there an ethnic relationship? Is there a gender relationship? Is there a nationality? Is there a relationship to lifestyles? Is there a relationship to environmental factors? Is there a relationship to other diseases that can be had? So now what we start doing is very, very creative and very advanced research. So there are a couple of things here to understand. First, we do many, many, many cases. We just provide the software. The geneticist goes in, they do their work, and they receive the results. In the meantime, we're collecting all of the data. That data has tremendous, tremendous value to a number of organizations. First, pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical companies would love to understand what are the most prevalent diseases that kids have. what are the related conditions that they have, where in the planet these diseases are most prevalent, what populations are greatly affected and such, so they can better define and more precisely define the cures, the vaccines, the pharmaceutical products that they should create specifically for an individual, not for a large population, for an individual. This is what is being called personalized medicine, which is one drug does not help everybody. As a matter of fact, one size fits none. So the whole notion is, let's get a whole lot more specific with the information. Now we can decipher it to the unique genome, genetic properties of an individual. That's very, very key. Second is health systems, hospitals, clinics that need more information about how to treat people with different diseases. Now they have a very large database that they can say, all right, now we got a much better understanding of a child that has seizures and had these type of complications. Here's a better treatment related to it. Laboratories, we work with all of the major laboratories around the world, and they're as good as the last set of processes that they have gone through. Say that they do 100 different cases of pediatric or kids' genomes. Well, how does that 100 fit into the larger population of 150,000? So they can compare themselves, better their processes. And ultimately, insurance. Think of this. In the United States, there are 4 million kids born every year. 1 out of 10 is predisposed to some type of rare genetic disease. That doesn't mean every 1 of 10 kids is going to have a disease or be symptomatic, but say 20% of those 10% become symptomatic. It normally takes 5 years to properly diagnose a child with a rare genetic disease. 5 years. And on average, 8 different physicians, 8 different doctors that you have to go through. What's happening in those 5 years? Well, a lot of misdiagnosis, non-diagnosis, a lot of suffering and trauma for the child, and a lot of expense for the families. So what if you were able to diagnose a whole lot sooner with a whole lot more precision, and instead of being 5 years, you could reduce it to a year? Say you could reduce it to a day. How much money would you save as an insurance company? We did some very initial calculations. In the United States alone, it's about $30 billion of savings. So imagine, not only are you saving the trauma, but you're also saving a massive amount of money to the economy. And that's just what the insurance company is paying. The families wind up paying significantly more. So that's one example at one end of the spectrum, which is when kids are born, when kids are going through different stages of potentially rare diseases. The second part is quite interesting. At the other end, when we age, the whole notion of memory loss, dementia, and Alzheimer's starts becoming a very large issue. 1 out of 6 people in the United States over 65 will develop Alzheimer's. That's an incredible number. And it is a very, very devastating disease in the sense that not only do you lose your memory, but your body starts deteriorating, and it's a very long-term process to where the body decays. So it could be 5 years, it could be 10 years that you're actually suffering. However, the disease itself starts 20 years before you start seeing the symptoms. So say at age 45, something started creating the disease within your body. You don't realize it until you're age 65, and then you go through this very, very troubling period to go analyze. The unfortunate thing about Alzheimer's, and a lot of your grandparents might have gone through this thing or some relatives, so we've all been affected by it one way or another. What's amazing is we don't know the cause and we don't have a cure. We know what ultimately happens to our brains. There are a lot of proteins called tau proteins that build up, and amyloids, which are another crusty set of things that start getting in the way of our neurons talking to each other in the brain. Okay, and that plaque actually starts forming and solidifying to the point that our thought process, our memory processes are blocked, and therefore we can no longer be in a proper cognitive state. We cannot reflect. Not only can we not express ourselves, but the signaling from our mind to the rest of our body starts getting blocked. And that's how the body starts deteriorating. That's how we start getting tremors. That's how we got to start getting a deficiency. That's how we stop walking. That's how we stop eating. So this is all very, very complex. But here's the deal. The future is not exploring dead people's brains and looking at the obvious. The future is learning what is causing this and start getting predictive about it and start developing the proper ways to actually both determine that somebody has it early on, but also how do you fight it. So the projects that we have going on related to Alzheimer's and using artificial intelligence are much more sophisticated. Typically now, most of the research that is going on at a research center, a university, or a company is mice, monkeys, and dead people. So we're studying the obvious, and we're starting to see if there's a relationship when we can make the mustache of a mouse twitch. You know, what's the relationship that we have with a human being? Very, very outdated. So what we're doing is creating big data models. Big data model means you take lots and lots of very different information from a human and start creating to see if there are relationships with all of the different variables that are going on. The first is your genomic profile, the genetic information about yourself. That is very, very critical. There is a genetic predisposition to Alzheimer's. That doesn't mean you're going to get it, but you have a predisposition already in the body. Okay, so if we capture somebody's genetic information, then you can start seeing what the predisposition might be. What are the other factors that could be causing the Alzheimer's? Well, your biochemical markers. Are there fluids in your body that actually determine the potential sense that you have a predisposition to Alzheimer's? The third is your cognition itself. Are there measurements that we can do within the body? But here's where it gets interesting. Those are the typical way that a doctor would diagnose something. What if there are dietary factors that make you much more susceptible or less susceptible to a disease like Alzheimer's? When was the last time your doctor asked you a question about what you're eating, what your diet is all about? Never. However, we can capture that in a database and make it one of the variables. So now you got genetics. Now you got biochemical markers from a blood test or a DNA test. Now you have life information, your lifestyle information. Then what about environmental information? There's a city in Colombia, the country of Colombia, called Antioch. It's a fascinating phenomenon because there are 26 primary families in this city. 50% of the population, 50% of the population have Alzheimer's by age 30. What is that all about? Well, obviously there's a genetic predisposition. But what else is going on there? How come the other 50% don't have it? They certainly have the genetic infrastructure within it, but why are the rest not getting it? Well, it turns out the city is very close to some mines for heavy metals, copper and cobalt and, a lot of the foreign things. What if that is actually triggering the effect of Alzheimer's? That's a big data problem. We've done a lot of studies on concussion. We've done a lot of studies in concussion. Kids that have gone through concussion, okay, from a variety of sports, football, soccer, lacrosse, you name it. And the challenge is, at what point in time did a blow to the head trigger something else that will become evident down the line? So we're looking at multiple ways to create that data. So now you have genomic, now you have biochemical, now you have lifestyle, now you have environmental, then you have trauma. Trauma is a blow to the head. So now what we're doing is creating big data models and saying, computer, go at it and look for patterns that are not obvious to the human brain, to us. Okay, we can typically do a 2x2 matrix fairly well, but when it gets to n by n, it gets really, really hard. So we're looking at ways that we can use the reasoning, the pattern recognition of the supercomputers through their algorithms to see if there are different patterns, different relationships of things that happen. We believe that Alzheimer's and autism could be a combination of 32 different factors that happen simultaneously at a point in time in a body. Okay, so it's a combination of the genomic and everything else that we talked about. Well, what if you can actually remove one of those 32 variables? Does the condition not create itself? That's interesting. What if we stretch the time factor of when different things happen in your life? We modify the behavior so that the incidence of Alzheimer's starts happening instead of 65 at 70, at 75 at 85. So now we're actually moving the needle away. What if we can actually start pre-understanding what the human condition is? In other words, predictive modeling. One of the areas that is most important about the genomics and AI, artificial intelligence, is your ability to both simulate as well as predict. For the most part, you'll hear the term statistics and biostatistics. Statistics tells you what happened. Analytics, artificial intelligence, tells you why it happened and what's likely to happen next. That's the predictive modeling. Okay? So there are two things that are going on here that are very, very important. The first is the ability to capture enough data to create the model. But think of how long it takes in a laboratory to get a reaction from a mouse. And how many mice do you have to have in place to say this is normal or this is common? How many dead people do you have to monitor to say, hey, here's a situation that we're seeing? If you can create the equivalent model within a computer of a human condition, either a chemical reaction, a structural reaction, an electrical reaction within the body, what if you can actually create those and simulate them in a machine? And in the machine, you can do it with a whole lot more variables. You can do it a whole lot faster, and you can certainly do it a whole lot cheaper. So what if you can do in real time what was taking us years to do with a whole lot less sampling? In other words, what if a machine can do 1 million tests in 1 minute and provide us much more accurate results. Will that help? So we're using the artificial intelligence to completely transform how we think about health. Objective number one is, yes, deal with a lot of the diseases that are afflicting the body, diseases that we don't know. And unfortunately, the way the medical industry treats it today is, well, let's try this, let's try that. Well, that didn't work. Let's try this. Let's throw chemicals into your body, which might not be needed, and let's see what happens. We don't deal that way. What we're doing is actually getting a fundamental understanding of how the body works, creating computer models that we can affect within those and simulate and predict what's likely to happen next. Okay? We have been very fascinated by how quickly a COVID vaccine was developed. Well, the development of the concept started happening 20 years ago of the RNA multiplication, but it was through a lot of the supercomputing capability that we were able to do as quickly as possible. The modeling, the development, the distribution, and such. So what you're seeing now, and you all in this call will be responsible for, how do you use artificial intelligence to improve the human condition? So the first step is eradicate a lot of the bad things that are happening to our bodies that we haven't gotten a good understanding of yet. The second is, how do we keep them from actually happening? So the first is, we can identify genes within the body and they say, these genes are producing this disease. Second step is, well, what if we can actually manipulate that gene so that it never causes that disease? That's very, very close. You're hearing about technologies called CRISPR, which it gives you the ability to actually modify the gene structure of an individual. So the first step is, we got a problem, let's fix it. The second one is, let's prevent the problem. And then further down the line, people are talking about genetic engineering. Genetic engineering is now, how do we create a better body, something that is much more resistant to diseases, something that performs better. That's way out there, and it has a lot of questions to go with it. But if we can concentrate right now, and with your minds, this is what's going to be very, very important. If we can concentrate the engineering mind into solving very large problems. And the reason I stress engineering mind is quite different. The physician mind, the medical student mind, gets taught to memorize and repeat. Memorize and repeat. So we keep doing the same thing over and over and over. The engineering mind is quite different. The engineering mind challenges everything that we know and tries to make it better. You destroy everything that you know and reconstruct it. This is the continuous improvement. This is how we better the technology. This is how we continuously improve the technology. This is why computer systems processing doubles in speed every 18 months. Why? Because we didn't sit back and say, well, let's do the same thing over and over and over again and expect something different. We change, we completely perfect. And that's the reason that you're on this call, because you have the curiosity, you have the passion, you have the ingenuity to push the envelope. You're going to be handed some of the greatest tools that the mankind has ever developed. Now, in your hands, you have the capability to do some marvelous, marvelous things. The first one, and the one that I put in everybody that I hire's contract, improve the human condition. There's a lot of room for improvement, and we're all going through doing that. So let's at this point stop. I'll take questions, and then we'll continue the conversation. Any questions so far?
so far, there's no questions in the chat.
Okay, we'll give it a couple minutes. All right. So a couple of things that we're doing related to Alzheimer's while you think of the questions. We're actually working down here with the universities, with University of Miami, FIU, and Florida Atlantic University, in developing projects that will capture massive amounts of data from the population. So one project is we're going out to thousands of people in the neighborhoods, in very selected neighborhoods, and we say, all right, we want you to answer all of these questions related to a lot of things. Don't put your name because we don't want identify anybody in by person, but we say, all right, so your ethnicity, your gender, your situation, your lifestyle, your diet, your economic factors, your exposures to elect power lines, to G5 technology, to a bunch of different things related to it, your education level. And then we want you to take this memory test. And this memory test is a 3-minute online test that gives you a pretty good indication of how quickly you respond and how much you retain. From those 3-minute tests, we're able to define a baseline of where your memory status is all about. Well, what if we can take that memory test and combine it with all of these other factors that we built into the equation, and we start seeing that there are relationships between the memory loss and education levels, this type of diet, this type of environmental condition, this type of education level, this type of ethnicity background. And that becomes an eye opener. When was the last time you went to a physician, they asked you, what's your diet? None. So the ability to populate the databases with a whole lot more information, very, very key. So what we're doing is putting massive amounts of data. Likewise, we're going to the neurologist and saying, instead of those 10, 20 different questions, let's ask much more clinical based information. Okay. So a neurologist, when you go to the neurologist, all they look at is the head. Well, what if we start asking questions about your circulatory system or your renal system or your gastro system? I think there's a relationship between the gut and the brain. So what if we start combining medical factors and genomic factors into the cognition? And we start developing big data models to actually pull these together and start seeing if there are relationships, medical relationships between different diseases. And they become predictive as to what could happen in your body based off of the big data models. So these are actually real life projects that we have going on right here in South Florida. And we're collaborating with Harvard University, with Stanford University, with MIT, but the projects are here. And the message is, in South Florida, we're looking at massive amounts of innovation going on. We have lots of technology. We have lots of health systems in South Florida. So we're able to do some very, very important projects. Any questions so far?
No questions on the chat, but I do have a question. What about, have you had any interaction with the bioethical components of what you're doing? Is that into it?
Yeah, great question, because that comes up as, are we stepping on some boundaries that some of the work that is being done could be either violating privacy or violating some things that we as a society are not ready for. The whole notion of bioengineering and creating and perfecting a human being is an issue. So far, the number one issue is, can we protect the data? Can we protect somebody's identity from it? And there are HIPAA laws that you'll hear about from the medical industry that says, maintain somebody's privacy so that nobody would identify you and you having a condition or such. The second is when we start pushing the envelope related to different conditions or things that we could explore. We're not there yet. There's always the fear factor that somebody might step on something. Every time the mankind has thought that we're right there on the verge, the world has not ended. So the first time that we were very concerned about cloning animals, actually cloning started about 20 years ago. The first was a cow in Scotland called Dolly, or sheep in Scotland called Dolly, and then we started replicating cows, and then we're learning. But the human mind, and especially the engineering minds that you guys have, are always challenging the possibilities. So a lot of our responsibility as professionals, as scientists, as engineers, is to protect a level of sanity as to what it is that we're doing. Do no harm, but also when you push the envelope, make sure that you're actually improving a condition, make sure that there is a replication, make sure that there are all the safeguards in place so that somebody that might want to do something not right or evil is not allowed to do that. So we're going to keep pushing. We got a lot of bioethical folks involved, as they should be. But so far, nothing that we've been doing has crossed any kind of barriers. Very good question.
Very interesting. Does anybody have questions? You can type them in the chat, and I can relay them to Mr. Martinez. Very interesting. I come from a health background, so I don't have the engineering mind, but my family does. All my brothers and sisters are all engineers, and I went into healthcare. So very interesting and something to look forward to, though I don't know. I'll be here to see it all, but it is exciting things that are going on that you don't even realize.
Yeah, and we're very fortunate to have one of the last projects that I worked at IBM was in 1976. In 2006. At that time, the bird flu, the pandemic that had happened back in the year 1918. So the bird flu, the H5N1. Started coming out of Asia, again, out of China. The last time that virus, that type of mutation had happened in the world, 50 million people died in this planet. It was a combination of World War I and the pandemic going on at the same time. More people died from the pandemic than died from World War I. So when the whole virus thing starts coming up again back about 15 years ago, I was at IBM, and the Scripps Research Institute, one of the world's top genetics laboratories in the world, had just moved into here in Palm Beach County. So I met with the president of Scripps, and he had this notion of what if we, and it will blow your mind. He said, been thinking about digging up some soldiers that died in World War I from the virus that are in permafrost in Alaska, semi-frozen in Alaska. Dig up the bodies, bring the virus back to life, transform a biological form into a mathematical form, put it in the IBM supercomputer, Blue Gene, spin it a bazillion times to see what are the 5 most likely mutations of the virus. And then once you have those 5, create again the biological form, the virus that has mutated itself, and create the vaccine against that virus. So, in other words, he said, you remember when you, IBM, played chess against the Grandmaster Kasparov? He says, here we're going to play chess against a virus. And he actually had a code name for the project, Project Checkmate. So we were anticipating the moves of a virus, the mutations of the virus, and going through it. That project actually was published in Science magazine, in Nature magazine. It became what created IBM's computational biology research team. A lot of the science that was created by that project is being used today. I met with Dr. Fauci multiple times in that project. So think of, that was technology from 15 years ago. Think of how much the technology has evolved to now. And this is one of the reasons that we were able to develop drugs in less than a year, because now we're using a lot of artificial intelligence. We're using a lot of processing. We're using a lot of modeling work to define that.
Very interesting. Super interesting, especially going through COVID and people not understanding the process of how we were able to get a vaccine to market quickly. And
Correct. And a lot of it was a different model. Okay, a different model. You know, a typical drug normally takes about 15 years to develop and about $1 billion. And the reason is most drugs never make it all the way through the trials. However, if you look at a drug commercial on TV, it's about 5 seconds of what the drug should do and 55 seconds of what else could happen to you, including death. There's no other industry that allows you to ship a product that from normal use could kill you. Okay? So, and by the way, 50% of the drugs that get released to the market are recalled within 5 years. So you go, we can do a whole lot better than that, because normally the clinical trial had 300, 1,000 people in it. Think of now you can model a population of 1 million,
right,
of 100 million, and go through the cycle.
Thank you. Well, your time is up. It went so quick. I hope everybody learned something. It was nice meeting you. I appreciate your time, and I know I learned a lot. Thank you so much, Mr. Martinez.
My pleasure, and congratulations on shooting engineer. I hope to work for all of you someday.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.